Welcome to the channel and welcome to my review of Codex Deathwatch, which is available to pre-order on the 5th of May and available to buy on the 12th of May. This is a codex for Warhammer 40k 8th edition. So before we begin, as usual, thank you to Games Workshop for sending this pre-order copy through so people like myself and other bloggers and YouTubers on there can get their hands on it and share what we've found inside this hallowed tome with the rest of the internet world. And it's a good one. Codex Deathwatch is here, the chamber militant of the Ordo Xenos, and they got some new toys. They've got all the new Primaris goodness, so intercessors, jumpy dudes, the Redemptor, the Repulsor, the Aggressors, all the hot new shiny toys that you can get for Space Marines, that you can get for Blood Angels, are in here as well. You can get Primaris captains now, Deathwatch captains. It's a juicy book. It should be a juicy book because whenever the Inquisition wants some Xenos killing to do, these are the guys they call on, the Deathwatch. Or these are the guys that they assemble, the Deathwatch, and start stomping as many Xenos and destroying the alien wherever they can. So it makes perfect narrative sense that the Inquisition would see the new Primaris Space Marines and say, yep, we'd like some of them, please. Let's give them some specialist ammunition as well, because as we all know, one of the good things that the Deathwatch have is access to specialist ammunition. And it hasn't changed really from the index version. You've got Dragonfire, Hellfire, Kraken bolts and Vengeance rounds. And Dragonfire bolts add 1 to hit rolls when a unit is in cover. Hellfire rounds always wound on a 2 unless the target unit is a vehicle in Titanic or Titanic. That Titanic bit is a bit of an addition there. So those are the go-to ones, Hellfire rounds. I think always wounding on a 2 seems to be the go-to one. Kraken bolts, you add 3 to the range. If it's a pistol, add 6 inches to the range. If it's not a pistol, and you improve the AP of the attack by 1, so AP 0 becomes -1 to a maximum of AP -2. So increased range and increased AP -1. And then Vengeance rounds, subtract 3 from the range. If it's a pistol, 6 inches from the range if it's another weapon, and improve the AP of the attack by 2. So AP 0 becomes AP -2 to a maximum of AP -3. And they specify which weapons you can use the specialist ammunition in. There's a long list. Basically anything with a bolt round, such as Absolver bolt rifles, auto bolt rifles, heavy bolt pistols, a master-crafted auto bolt rifle, master-crafted this, that and the other, combi grav, combi melters, anything that can fire a bolt round can fire a special issue ammunition bolt round as well. And now we've got the access to the new hotness. Now intercessors are in here, remember? Intercessors already shoot 30 inches across the table at -1 AP, which they're pretty good for troops. So if you gave them Kraken rounds, for example, intercessors will be shooting 36 inches across the table at -2 AP. Lovely stuff. Stick a watch captain with them, they're re-rolling hit rolls of 1. Stick a watch master with them, they're re-rolling all hit rolls, shooting 36 inches across the table at -2 AP. And intercessors are cheap. Intercessors are 18 points. The points cost for all the Deathwatch stuff in here is the same as the Space Marine stuff, sort of. So intercessors are 18 points. And Jumpy Dudes Inceptors, 25 points. But basically anything with a... in the Space Marine book, you pay the same cost for the model. But the bolt weaponry that you fire, bolt rifles, bolt guns, are 0 points. In here, everything's 1 more point expensive. So a bolt rifle, an intercessor with a bolt rifle in the Space Marine book is 18 points. An intercessor with a bolt rifle in this book is 19 points. 1 more point for that special ammunition round. In the Space Marine book, if you put a dude on a biker with a twin bolter on it, I think it's 25 points for the bike, 2 points for the twin bolter. Here it's 4 points for the twin bolter. There's an exception to every rule, however, and the exception here is Jumpy Dudes Inceptors. You cannot give specialist ammunition to Inceptors. So they cost the same points in here as they do in the Blood Angels, Dark Angels and Space Marine books. They're 25 points for an Inceptor, 10 points for an Assault Bolter. They have 2 of them, so they're 45 points each. In all of the Codex Astartes codexes that you have, 45 points in here as well, but they don't get specialist ammunition. So as I said, there's a long list of the guns that you can get specialist ammunition for, but not for Inceptors. I guess it would be entirely broken if you could give them specialist ammunition as well. It would be absolutely me. There'd be no need for them to take plasma, because the plasma Inceptors are AP -3, and if these guys had an access to an additional AP -2 with the Vengeance rounds on their assault bolters, so they're firing at AP -3, then there would be no need for you to get plasma. And narratively speaking, they've got a gun in each of their hands, right? So how are they reloading? How are they switching their bolt gun ammunition around all over the place for which shot that they need? They've got their finger on the trigger permanently all the time. So Inceptors do not have access to specialist ammunition, but Intercessors do. And that's definitely a thing. So Deathwatch do what Space Marines do, but better, because of their special issue ammunition. So add 1 to hit rolls if anyone's in cover, so you're hitting on 2s, or you're wounding on 2s with Vengeance round, or you're going to be AP -1 or AP -2 on top of any of the APs that you have as well. Lovely, lovely Deathwatch ammunition. And on top of that, they've got a couple of extra rules, and the first rule is, of course, troops choices. Defenders of Humanity, troops choices always score objectives unless there's another troop choice there. And then they have mission tactics, and essentially mission tactics apply to infantry, biker, dreadnoughts in a battle forged list. So you'd need to bring a battle forged list. All your infantry, all your bikers, all your dreadnoughts get mission tactics. You pick one mission tactic, it applies to all your infantry, all your bikers, all your dreadnoughts. Now, your mission tactic stays the same throughout the game, and basically the mission tactics are reroll wound rolls of 1. And you've got Furor tactics, Venator tactics, Dominatus tactics, Malleus tactics, but they're always reroll wound rolls of 1. You pick it, and all your infantry, biker, dreadnoughts guys reroll wound rolls of 1. But the first one is reroll wound rolls of 1 for troops, and then reroll wound rolls of 1 for fast attack, and then elites, heavy, HQ, and flyers. So basically you pick one particular unit that you really want to reroll wound rolls of 1 against, and you've got that. So remember, Hellfire rounds always wound on a 2, so you'll be shooting, you'll be hitting, wounding on 2s, and rerolling 1s, and maximizing the amount of wounds that you've got out. Now, that mission tactic is not fixed for the whole game. It is fixed for the whole game, but there's plenty of ways that you can change it. The first way you can change it is by spending 2 command points for adaptive tactics, and you can change your mission tactic. But if you've got a Watchmaster as your Warlord, then it'll only cost you 1 command point for adaptive tactics to change your mission tactics halfway through. So say you've been pounding the crap out of troops and re-rolling wound rolls of 1 versus troops, and there's not very many left, and you want to start picking on elites, then you can change it halfway through your battle. There's also a Warlord trait called Vigilance Incarnate, and Watch Captain Artemis gets Vigilance Incarnate as well. He's the named character in here, HQ. And during the battle, at the start of your turn, you can choose to change your army's current mission tactic for another one. So during the battle, start your turn, change your tactic. Then there's also a relic, the Tome of Etoclades. Basically there's a relic. There's only 6 relics in the book, and this is one of them. At the start of your turn, pick a mission tactic. And until the start of your next turn, you can choose to apply either the effects of the mission tactic that is currently active, or the mission tactic that you've chosen from the Tome of Etoclades for any Deathwatch unit from your army within 6 inches of the bearer each time they attack. So mission tactics, reroll wound rolls of 1 versus a type, versus troops or elites or heavies or something. And there's ways of changing that with relics and with stratagems and with command points. Remember, rerolling wound rolls of 1 is in close combat as well as shooting them. So when you're punching them with thunderhammers and things like that, you can do it, and it applies to dreadnoughts. So your Redemptor dreadnought, remember he's in here as well as your veteran dreadnoughts. These guys will be re-rolling wound rolls of 1 as well. Basically, as well as getting some crazy good ammunition, which they always have, the Deathwatch have got a bit more killy. Deathwatch kill team has got a little bit cheaper as well. I think Deathwatch veterans in the index were 19 points a pop. These guys are now 16 points a pop, but remember, you're paying a point for your bolt gun and for your bolt pistol, so they're 18 points really, because the bolt pistol, anything with a bolt profile except for that assault bolter for those Inceptors. Most of the bolt weapons in here cost a point now or 2 more than they did in the Space Marine book. What I'm really saying is they're a bit cheaper, but check your weapons values in the points cost because things in there are a bit funny. So for example, a combi plasma in the Deathwatch book is 1 point more expensive than it is in the Space Marine book. The combi melter in the Deathwatch book is 1 point more expensive than it is in the Space Marine book. Storm bolters, for example, for Blood Angels and for Space Marines, normal Space Marines are 2 points a pop. In here, storm bolters are 4 points a pop. So they're paying you for those special ammunition rounds. They're charging you for those special ammunition rounds. And one more thing, the Corvus Blackstar went down 10 points. There's a couple of the other points changes in here as well are basically to bring it in line with the Space Marines book and the Dark Angels book and the Blood Angels book. So the bikes and the Terminators and everything in here is reduced to the same level as it is in the other Astartes books. So everything costs the same for the unit, but you pay a bit more for the weaponry because they're Deathwatch and their weaponry is awesome. All the guns that they put in, the bullets that they put in their weaponry is awesome. Okay, so I've mentioned that the mission tactics is reroll wound rolls of 1 versus a certain unit type, such as troops, fast attack, elites, for example. But there's also equivalent stratagems, 2 points each, which improve your chances to wound by 1. Add 1 to your wound rolls versus troops, or add 1 to your wound rolls versus fast attack, or add 1 to your wound rolls versus elites. Each of them costs 2 points each. For example, the mission tactic, Dominatus tactic, allows you to re-roll wound rolls of 1 versus elites. That's the mission tactic. But the Dominatus doctrine in the stratagems deck allows you to add 1 to wound rolls versus elites. So when you combine these stratagems, which is +1 to wound, versus the mission tactics, which are re-roll wound rolls of 1, you're soon going to be chewing through units quite effectively. I should mention in the HQ section, there is no lieutenant or lieutenant if you're American option to take as a HQ. You've got Primaris watch captains, librarians, and librarians in Terminator armor. You've got watch captains, watch masters, chaplains, but there is no lieutenant slot in the HQ. So there is no auto bubble of rerolling wound rolls of 1 except for the mission tactic that you have. So it's not like you can pick a particular mission tactic to reroll wound rolls of 1 versus troops and then have a lieutenant nearby that can allow you to do that with everything else you got, because there isn't any lieutenants in here, so it doesn't stack that way. And while we're busting through the stratagems, let's just talk about them, because there's 3 pages of them. Now, there's a chunk of stratagems in here that are equivalent to the Dark Angels one, the Blood Angels one, and Space Marine one, such as Hellfire Shells, Spec Scan, Armor of Contempt, Orbital Bombardment, Only in Death does duty end. There's a number of stratagems in here that we've seen in the Space Marine and the other Astartes books. But I really want to talk about the juicy Deathwatch ones, because Deathwatch take on aliens, right? Well, listen to this. Stem the green tide, 2 command points. Use this stratagem immediately before an overwatch with a Deathwatch unit from your army against a charging Orc unit. Your opponent must subtract 1 from their charge distance for each model in the charging unit that was slain by your unit's overwatch fire. So a horde of boys is about to come crashing into you, 30 of them, you kill 10 of them. If you kill 10 of them, then your opponent must subtract 1 for each model in the charging unit that was slain during the overwatch fire. So you got your frag cannon there, or your flamers there, and has burnt away a number of them. Even killing 4 or 5 of them and taking your opponent taking 4 or 5 inches off that charge for 2 command points. That's nice. Targeting scramblers. So that's against orcs. This one is against Tau. Use this stratagem immediately after a Deathwatch unit from your army has been hit by 1 or more Tau Empire Markalites. Immediately remove all Markalites counters from that unit. 1 command point. Targeting scramblers. Yeah. So your Tau opponent has lit up your unit with 4 or 5 Markalites and they're going to absolutely nail it. Spend the command point. All those Tau Markalites have disappeared under your targeting scramblers. 2 command points. This is versus Eldar. Use this stratagem after your opponent moves an Eldari unit that can fly in their movement phase. Pick a Deathwatch unit from your army within 12 inches of it. So there's an Eldari unit that's come within 12 inches of you in their movement phase. Then you can shoot at it. You must subtract 1 from all the hit rolls, but you can shoot at it for 2 command points. Intercepting volley. 2 command points. This is versus Nids. Use this stratagem immediately before choosing targets for a Deathwatch unit from your army in your shooting phase. That unit can target synapse creatures this turn, even if they're not the closest enemy unit. Synaptic Severance. So you could pick a Deathwatch unit. It just says pick a Deathwatch unit. You could potentially pick a Dreadnought. You could pick a Land Raider with 4 las cannons on it to pick off that Neurothrope in the distance. But basically you can target synapse creatures even if they're not the closest. And for 1 command point, Overkill, this is versus Necrons. Use this stratagem at the beginning of your opponent's turn before they use reanimation protocols. Opt for a Necron unit that's within 12 inches of a Deathwatch unit from your army. So they've got to be close, they've got to be within 12 inches of a unit. But your opponent subtracts 1 from any reanimation protocols they make for the unit that turn. So instead of them reanimating on a 5-up, they're reanimating on a 6-up. Or if they've got a Cryptek nearby, which normally allows them to reanimate on a 4-up, they're only reanimating on a 5-up. And I really like that one. Only 1 command point. I like it for the narrative sense. You can imagine Deathwatch know how to kill Necrons. The Necron unit comes crashing down. You've killed half of them or 3/4 of them or however many of them. And the Deathwatch unit is still pumping round after round after round into the dead bodies on the ground, or nearly dead bodies, living metal dead bodies on the ground, as they're trying to reanimate, as they're trying to pull themselves back together again. So instead of reanimating as easily as they normally do, it's -1 to their reanimation protocol. And it's called Overkill. Brilliant. Just dumping rounds in there, or chuck a few frag grenades. So, and that's it. Those are the 6 ones, or the 5 ones, sorry, versus Xenos. Very narrative, very fluffy. 1 for Orcs, 1 for Tau, 1 for Eldari, 1 for Nids, and 1 for the Necron units there. And they're all 2 or 1 command points each, but I like them. If they're should be stratagems like this somewhere in 40k, then they belong in this Deathwatch book. Other stratagems, there's a Teleportarian here, which allows you to put Deathwatch infantry and Deathwatch dreadnoughts in Deep Strike reserve. There's a 1 command point optimized salvo. Use this stratagem in your shooting phase immediately before choosing targets for a Deathwatch unit from your army with a special ammunition ability. Different models in the unit can use different types of special ammunition for that attacks. Specify which models will fire which type of ammunition before any hit rolls are made. So typically what normally happens is you pick a unit and you say, I'm using this shell this turn, and they all fire that shell. But for 1 command point, you can mix and match it. You can say, well, these 5 guys are going to be firing Kraken rounds, and these guys are going to be firing Vengeance rounds. There are other stratagems there, but I think those are the most interesting ones. The ones that are alien specific and the ones that improve your wound rolling. I like that. Relics, let's talk about the relics. There's 6 of them. Already mentioned 1, which allows you to adjust your mission tactic. But the first one, Bane Bolts of X something. Add 1 to any damage of the special issue ammunition fired by the bearer. In addition, each wound roll of 6+ made for any special issue ammunition fired by the bearer, the target suffers a mortal wound in addition to the normal damage. So you'd give these Bane Bolts to a Terminator Captain maybe, or yeah, Terminator Captain would be good. Give him this relic and he's adding 1 to the damage of any special ammunition weaponry he fires. The Beacon of Angelus is once per battle, and you can teleport a Deathwatch infantry or biker unit from one side of the battlefield and put them within 6 inches of your Warlord. Or 6 inches of the bearer of the relic, so long as they end up more than 9 inches away from any enemy model. Pick them up, move them, stick them down 6 inches from the relic, 9 inches away from an enemy unit. That's once per battle. Dominus Aegis. Models with a Storm Shield only. Basically, you replace the Storm Shield. You still have a 3-up invulnerable save, but if the bearer does not move in your movement phase, if the bearer doesn't, then until the start of the next movement phase, friendly Deathwatch models within 6 inches of the bearer gain a 5+ invulnerable save. So you could give this to your Terminator guy. and you're moving up with your unit. There's a Terminator guy in the unit. He's got a Storm Shield. Say that's the Dominus Aegis. Just don't move him one particular turn, and everyone within 6 inches of him gets a 5-up invulnerable save. Not just the guys in his unit, but any Deathwatch model. It says friendly Deathwatch models. That would hit a Dreadnought, that would hit a Land Raider, that would hit anything with a Deathwatch keyword, that would hit the unit next door. So if you've got 2 Deathwatch units close by, as long as this Terminator guy doesn't move, everyone in that unit getting a 5-up invulnerable save. The Osseous key. The Osseous key is for Watchmasters only. Enemy vehicles subtract 1 from their hit rolls while they're within 9 inches of the bearer of the relic, the Watchmaster. And each time the bearer fights, he can make an additional attack against a vehicle and do up to D3 mortal wounds against them. And then there's the Thief of Secrets, which is it's a power sword with damage 2, basically. And you pick Orc, Tyranid, Tau Empire, Eldari, or Necrons at the start of your game, and then you're re-rolling wound rolls versus that unit. So if you want a pimped up power sword and your relic bearer go charging in there, re-rolling wound rolls, it's still strength user, -3 AP, but it's 2 damage instead of 1. And re-rolling wound rolls versus that target unit, then you can pick this power sword. I don't think anyone's going to be picking the pimped up power sword. People might be picking the Osseous key if they intend to get the Watchmasters right up the table, close to units, close to enemy vehicles. 9-inch bubble that, remember. -1 to hit rolls for the vehicle. But I can see people bring in the Dominus Aegis, the invulnerable Storm Shield guy, and moving him up the table and standing him still so that everyone within 6 inches of him gets a 5-up invulnerable save. Warlord traits. There is a stratagem farming Warlord trait, and it's called Lord of Hidden Knowledge. Every time your Warlord, every time you use a command point, roll a d6, and on a 5-up you gain the command point back. So it's only for you spending command points. On a 5-up, you get it back. You've got other Warlord traits there. I mentioned Vigilance Incarnate, which is changing the mission tactic halfway through a game. But you've got one that allows you to reroll wound rolls for your Warlord when attacking vehicles or monsters. You've got add 1 to the damage characteristics of your Warlord. Watch Eternal. Roll d6 each time a Deathwatch model from your army within 6 inches of your Warlord loses their last wound, and on a 6-up the wound is not lost. So a bit of Iron Hands chapter tactics there. 6-up, ignoring wounds. You got to be within 6 inches of your Warlord, but it might keep them alive a bit longer. Iron Hands chapter tactics are definitely a thing. And then Nowhere to Hide. At the start of each of your shooting phases, pick 1 enemy unit anywhere on the battlefield. So pick a unit way over there, that's fine. For the duration of the phase, that unit does not receive the benefit of cover against attacks made by Deathwatch units, so long as they're within 6 inches of your Warlord. Those are the 6 command points. People are going to pick Lord of Hidden Knowledge for command point farming. Those are the relics. The Librarius discipline, the psychic powers in the Deathwatch Codex are the same as in the Space Marine Codex. They are Veil of Time, Might of Heroes, Psychic Scourge, Fury of Ancients, Psychic Fortress, and Null Zone. Null Zone's very good. If you don't know what they are, then you can Google it, because I think we're very familiar with the Librarius discipline by now. Null Zone's the good one. That's the one where enemy units within 6 inches of the librarian can't take their invulnerable saves. That one's pretty pokey. And apart from that one, you smite away, because you're only going to have 1 or 2 librarians in there. So at this time, we've talked about their special issue ammunition. We've talked about their mission tactics and how they can pimp that with certain stratagems. And we've talked about certain relics and other stratagems. I've also mentioned the points. In most cases, in all cases, the points have gone down a little bit, a tiny bit here or there, and to bring them in line with the other Space Marine books. But this is an elite army, so veterans being a point cheaper when you add on their bolt rifle, bolt pistol. Veterans being a little bit cheaper here. You're not going to build an army, a new army using this codex and suddenly find yourself 200 points left over because it's so much cheaper than beforehand. When you build your army now using this codex, you might find you've got 20, 30 points for some toys, and that's about it, or another model here or there. So points tweaked a bit. But back in the chunk of the book, you've got Watchmasters, Watch Captain Martimus, you've got Watch Captains in Terminator armor, you've got a Primaris Watch Captain, Librarian, Librarian in Terminator armor, Primaris Librarians, Chaplains and Primaris Chaplains. So those are all your HQ slots. You've got Primaris guys in there. And then the troop slots, you've now got 2. Beforehand, you only had the Deathwatch thingy bob. What were they called? It was called a Deathwatch kill team. That's gone. Now it's veterans. That's what they're called, veterans. And there's another troop slot, which you didn't have before, called intercessors. So you've got 2 types of troops to pick from. However, it's Deathwatch. It gets a bit more complicated than that. Because in the veteran slot, you can mix and match. In your veterans, you can put in your Terminator and a Biker and a Vanguard vet if you want to. You could do this before, but I'm just repeating it for anyone who didn't know. So instead of just have standard veterans in there, you can put a couple of Terminators in there or a bike or something. And you're going to do this. And the reason why you're going to do this is because in a veteran slot, so long as one model has so long as one of the models in the unit has Terminator armor, that unit doesn't have to roll for morale. They automatically pass morale test, unflinching. And then Relentless Assault. When a unit of veterans, that includes bikers, any biker falls back, it can charge later that turn. And Vanguard Strike, they can move across other models if they weren't there. And in addition, when a unit of veterans, that includes any Vanguard veterans, falls back, it can shoot as though it could fly. So what does this mean? It means you put 1 Vanguard vet, 1 biker, 1 Terminator in your squad of Deathwatch, and you've got a unit that is immune to morale, that can fall back and shoot, and can charge after they fall back and shoot as well. They could do it in the index, they could still do it now, and it's a beautiful thing to behold. And when they fall back and shoot, it's not -1 to hit like Ultramarines Chapter Tactics. Oh no, you just need to put this 1 model in it. There's 1 Vanguard vet in it, and they can fall back and shoot or charge you again because there's a bike in there. So that's what veterans do when you mix up your chocolate box. They've still got 2 attacks. They'll still have their special issue ammunition, bolt guns, and now they're of course re-rolling wound rolls of 1 versus a certain unit type. But now you have intercessors. Now an intercessor squad, troop squad, contains 1 intercessor sergeant and 4 intercessors, and it can include up to 5 additional models in any combination. And the combination you can add, so you've got to start off with 5 intercessors, then you can add Hellblasters, Inceptors, Reavers and Aggressors to your squad. I still just like the idea of a couple of squads of 5 or 10 man intercessors in the backfield firing Kraken bolt rounds 36 inches across the table and hitting on with AP -2 and re-rolling wound rolls of 1 when they're firing. But yeah, these you can mix them up as before. You can put your Hellblasters in there, you can put your Interceptors in there. Now what happens is, if you've got any Inceptors in there, then your Intercessor troop squad can fall back and shoot as if it could fly. So you're always going to put 1 Inceptor into your Intercessor squad. So if it does get tied up in combat, it can fall back and shoot as though it could fly. If you put Reavers in there, enemy units subtract -1 from their leadership characteristic while they're within 3 inches of any Reaver units or a unit that contains a Reaver model. So you're not necessarily going to put a Reaver in there. Relentless Advance, though, if a unit of intercessors contains any aggressors in it, then they don't suffer the penalty to their hit rolls for advancing and firing assault weapons or for moving and firing heavy weapons. So if you put 1 aggressor in there and then add in some Hellblasters, for example, then your Hellblasters, when they're moving forward and firing their heavy gun version, if you give them the heavy gun version, won't suffer the minuses to moving and firing with their heavy gun version. You can add Reavers, Aggressors, and you can add whatever flavor of these particular models that you want to into your Intercessor blob, but you can't mix the Primaris troops with the standard veteran troops. I still like the idea, so you can still get better stuff with your veteran troops. Basically, the old school veterans will be immune to morale. They'll be able to fall back and fire and still charge again after falling back with a biker, with a vanguard, and with a terminator in it. They've still got some more flexibility in the standard veterans. The intercessors, all you really get is moving and firing heavy weapons or moving and firing assault weapons without negatives if you've got an aggressor in there, and if you've got an inceptor, being able to fall back and shoot as though you had the fly keyword. There's nothing you can take in the intercessor troop slot that makes that troop slot fearless, and there's nothing that you can take like a biker which allows you to charge back in even after you've fallen back out of combat. But they're intercessors, -1 bolt rifles already. I mean, just a squad of 5 intercessors at 24-inch range firing vengeance rounds. Their bolt guns at 24 inches are AP -3. AP -3 bolt rifles at 24 inches, because vengeance rounds have -6 inches to your range, but +2 AP. And they're 19 points each for an intercessor, firing -3 AP, basically plasma guns, which won't get hot, just rapid firing away. It's a beautiful thing. So I can see Primaris Deathwatch guys coming along. Definitely. There's also a Primaris Apothecary in here in this book. I didn't think the Deathwatch had access to apothecaries before, but you can take the Primaris Apothecary now, as well as 3 favorite flavors of Dreadnought. You've got Venerable and the normal Dreadnought, and the Redemptor Dreadnought is in here as well. And remember that Dreadnoughts do have access to mission tactics as well. So they will be re-rolling wound rolls of 1 versus a certain unit type. And then in the remainder of the book, you've got Terminators, which you can take in a unit 1, just as you could before, which is interesting. Reavers, Aggressors, Vanguard Veterans, Bikers, Inceptors, Hellblasters. Then Deathwatch have access to all the normal troop stuff, all the Land Raider variants, and Rhinos, Razorbacks, Drop Pods, and of course the Corvus Blackstar. You can't get any of Primaris troops in any of those things, but the Repulsor tank is in here as well, which you can stick your Primaris Marines in if you want to. So yeah, the Repulsor tank is in here. That's pretty much the book. Those are the unit choices that you have. I can see this book being painful on the battle grid. They're going to be able to adapt even more to certain unit types using these stratagems. Primaris Marines with access to specialist ammunition is just a nightmare when I think about it. Some guys are going to struggle against them, but on the flip side, at least the Primaris units will not be entirely fearless, because there won't be 1 Terminator stood there. They're going to have to rely on having the odd chaplain scattered around instead, I guess, to use his leadership rather than their own. But certainly if I was building a Deathwatch list, I'd buy a chunk of intercessors. Beforehand, they didn't have very many choices either. It's a highly elite, highly expensive book. Highly elite, highly expensive army with not a lot of options. So having the new hotness in there as well, having the Primaris Marines in there, if you can stand them, because I know there's still a lot of hate out there for them, but I like the models. I think the models are quite stunning. I think, and giving them the old silver arm with the Deathwatch iconography on it will look very cool. So I'll wrap up here. Thank you again to Games Workshop for sending this through so I can review it. Thank you to all my patrons for supporting me, and happy wargaming everyone else.